The Telepathy Tapes has been doing great business here in the UK and in the US. It's been flying up the podcast charts, loads of people gorging on it. And in a nutshell, the podcast series explores how or whether non speaking autistic children can, as they and in many cases their parents, teachers, caregivers claim, can communicate telepathically. Now, this is somewhat out there. And understandably, there has been some pushback in the media and elsewhere. And I'm not here to argue whether or not it's true or not. That's not the point of this video. But I just want to explore some of the criticisms of the telepathy tapes and turn it onto the some of the beliefs that people hold without even realizing it that prop up our worldview of materialism, which have a profound impact in terms of the way we treat each other, the way we treat the world, the way we treat animals, and even our beliefs about who we are. So, my wife sent me a review written by James Marriott in the Times. And I'm a fan of James Marriott. So I think he writes some brilliant articles. But I've got to say, there are a few things that struck me as a little bit out of kilter in this scathing review of the telepathy tapes that James wrote. So I'm going to read a paragraph from it, and it goes: The telepathy tapes is animated by contempt for all the values that underpin science, respect for evidence, a willingness to be wrong, a commitment to what is actually true instead of what you wish were true. So rather than applying those criticisms, those three criticisms to the telepathy tapes, I want to apply them to the hard problem of consciousness. The belief that consciousness is an emergent property of the brain. So, conscious experiences, the feeling of love, the taste of chocolate, the smell of a rose, the capacity to experience. Experiencing arises from matter, the brain. And the hard problem of consciousness states very clearly there is no way to explain how consciousness can emerge from the brain, even in theory. Clearly, there is a correlation between the brain and consciousness, but correlation does not equals causation. So to go back to James Marriott's criticisms, a respect for evidence. So the way he's written this, it's clearly coming from a materialist paradigm. But the key belief of materialism that props materialism up is the belief that consciousness is an emergent property of matter, of the brain. Well, if we're going to look at evidence and respect evidence, we have to respect the fact that that is a belief, not a fact. And the way this is written suggests to me an inability to recognize that it is a belief. So it doesn't even know that it's a belief rather than a fact. Number two, a willingness to be wrong. So most people who are aware of the hard problem of consciousness but are still materialists will claim that, well, we're pretty damn sure that consciousness is an emergent property of matter. We haven't proved it yet, but we will. Well, that's not a million miles from religious belief. That is a belief. That is not a fact. So a willingness to be wrong, you can't go, well, I believe it to be true, and enough of us believe it to be true. Therefore, it's as good as a fact. It's not. At one point, everyone thought the sun went around the earth. It seemed patently obvious. Galileo got in trouble for suggesting otherwise. And then it turns out, lo and behold, our senses deceive us. So a willingness to be wrong. There is not a widespread willingness to be wrong when it comes to consciousness. A commitment to what is actually true instead of what you wish were true. So if you think about it, there are electrical signals in the brain. How does an electrical signal become the profound and deep experience of love and heartbreak and things like that? I mean, that's such a giant leap that to cling to the fact that consciousness is definitely emergent, even though there's no evidence for that fact, for that belief rather, that is not a commitment to what is actually true, instead what you wish were true. That is wishing, well, we're sure that consciousness is emergent, and enough of us say so that's what we're sticking with. That does not pass James's third test. a commitment to what is actually true instead of what you wish were true. So I think this is a really revealing review in that most people don't even realize that there is this belief that consciousness is an emergent property of the brain and that it has such a profound impact on the way we treat ourselves, other people, the world, etc. They're completely oblivious to that fact. And the way James has written this suggests to me that he is one of those people, that he is someone who has a materialist framework and doesn't even know the key belief at the center of that materialist framework is a belief and not a fact. So that is very much like religious belief, except that in the case of religious people, at least they acknowledge their belief is based on faith, not a fact. But materialist people don't even realize there's a belief and not a fact. Most people assume it's a fact. It's not a fact. So you have to be open to the idea, you have to be open to the possibility that consciousness is not an emergent property of the brain, but could, for example, be fundamental. Be fundamental. And our experience is subjectivity precedes objectivity. In the waking state right now, there's subjectivity that's experiencing the world. When I'm asleep, there's a subjectivity that's experiencing my dreams. We don't know where that subjectivity is. You can't actually find it, but it clearly exists. There is the capacity for experience. There's experiencing, but tying it to an emergent property of the brain, that is a belief, not a fact. And if you don't realize that, then you are basically no different than, someone who holds hard to a religious belief, only you just don't know that that's what you're doing.